In early 1968, Daiei Film was weighing on financial collapse. Their budget for Gamera vs. Viras was slashed to roughly $140,000. Of course, it was in yen, not USD, but I'm trying to make it easier for you guys to understand. Now, that was barely a third of what its predecessors had received. Noriaki Yuasa returned as director and special effects supervisor, believing this low-cost entry might very well be the last. He went into production determined to keep it simple and sincere. Filming began at Daiei Tokyo Studios. Yuasa pushed for a strong connection between the monster and the children, drawing inspiration from Mission Impossible for espionage-like sequences. Daiei had only 25 days to shoot the movie. They reused a ton of stock footage from earlier Gamera films in order to cut costs. An agreement with American International Television required an American child actor to be in the movie. No bilingual performers were available, so they cast Carl Craig, son of a US serviceman stationed in Japan, in what would be his only acting role in a movie. When production ended, Yuasa considered this film to be his favorite out of any other movie in the Gamera franchise. Which is insane to me, and we'll talk about why, but was he on drugs? That being said, a lot of that has to do with the fact that he made his own cut of the film. On the Arrow Blu-ray, there's actually 3 versions of Gamera vs. Viras: the theatrical cut, the director's cut, and the extended American cut. The biggest difference between the theatrical cut and the director's cut is that the theatrical cut relies way less on stock footage and flashbacks to prior films in the franchise. Meanwhile, the American extended cut is a bloated mess that is even more reliant on stock footage. As a result, I do think the best version to watch is the theatrical cut. At a brisk 72 minutes in length, I seriously can't recommend that specific version enough. If there's one thing I've been consistent about in all of my critiques, it's pacing, but we'll get into the specifics of my analysis on this movie eventually. However, I just want to make it clear that the theatrical cut is the version of the film that I will be primarily reviewing and discussing in this very video, because the other versions just don't have a ton of original material, if any. It's all reused stuff. With Daiei's future uncertain, Gamera vs. Viras managed to hold things together thanks to Yuasa's direction, a catchy new theme song, and the continued focus on Gamera's connection to children. Without wasting any more time, this is 1968's Gamera vs. Viras. Really quick, I just want to announce that I will be attending G-Fest in Rosemont, Illinois on Sunday, July 13th. If you're planning to go, feel free to say hi. This will be my second time at G-Fest as a creator, and I'll be walking around most of the day checking out the panels and vendor booths. If you see me, don't be afraid to come up and say hi. Hope to see you there. When an alien spaceship attempts to invade Earth, the crew is thwarted by Gamera. In response, the aliens capture 2 Boy Scouts and use them to control Gamera through mind manipulation. Under their influence, Gamera attacks parts of Japan. The boys eventually escape and break the aliens' control over him. The invaders then combine into a giant squid-like monster named Viras. Gamera battles Viras in a lengthy fight, ultimately defeating the creature by carrying it high into the atmosphere and dropping it to its death. With the alien threat eliminated, Gamera returns to the ocean, and the boys are safely reunited with their families. Gamera vs. Viras is officially the point where the series stops aiming at a general audiences and plants both feet in the kids' market. From here on out, these movies are kids' movies, through and through. Every Showa entry that follows centers its attention on child protagonists, and it's obvious that this decision was not made halfway. This is where Daiei commits fully to courting the younger audience. Whether or not that decision was the right one is subjective, but it's a line in the sand. Personally, I've never been all that enthusiastic about this pivot myself. I still think Gamera vs. Barugan struck the perfect balance. It treated its story with sincerity, gave weight to the conflicts, and had no interest in playing to the Saturday matinee crowd. It was mature without being dour, and I wish that more of the series had followed that path. But I've always believed in meeting a movie where it's at. It's the mindset that I have of critique the movie for what it is and not for what I wanted it to be. Looking at what Gamera vs. Viras is and not what I wanted it to be, it's a mediocre kids movie at best. That's why I'm not going to be spending this whole retrospective complaining that Gamera vs. Viras isn't Gamera vs. Barugan. It's a kids movie, and I'm going to judge it accordingly. I think the fairest way to approach this movie is through a compliment sandwich. I'll start with the things that it does right, move into what holds it back, and then finish on a positive note. Because while I don't think Viras is particularly a good movie, it's still a product of people trying to make something work with very little money. There's something worth salvaging here, even if the final result is not good. Let's start with what the film gets right. The Virian spaceship is genuinely stunning. It's the one part of the film that actually feels like someone was trying to create something memorable. It is surreal and offbeat in a way that nothing else in the movie even attempts. It reminds me of concept art from Jodorowsky's Dune, filled with bold shapes and strange textures that feel truly alien. The interiors are just as inspired. Everything is built with a clear sense of texture and composition. Even when the materials look really cheap, the layout and lighting make up for it tenfold. There's a deliberate use of color that's missing from most of the film, and the set designers clearly understood how to create visual rhythm, even when the budget just wasn't there. Viras is another highlight. His design is grotesque and specific. There's nothing generic about him. He could have easily just been a giant squid. But he has this stiff, segmented movement that makes him feel like something pulled from a nightmare. The smaller Virians in their true form look great too, but you barely see them. The movie makes the baffling choice to hide them behind human disguises for nearly the entire film. That decision kneecaps the atmosphere. Instead of strange, squid-like invaders, we get a group of interchangeable men in jumpsuits droning through exposition. I understand it was a cost-saving measure, but it robs the film of its best assets. There's one moment that hints at what could have been, and that's the constant usage of the alien's eyes glowing yellow through the dark. It's very chilling. It's very understated. It works so well. And for a second, the Virians feel like they're actually threatening. But the film just doesn't build on it. It immediately shifts back to safe, unthreatening territory. Every time Gamera vs. Viras brushes up against something visually striking or tonally eerie, it retreats back. You can feel the potential. You can see it in the concept work. But the film is constantly undermining itself to cut costs or to avoid scaring the kiddies. That's what makes it so frustrating, because there is something great here. The people designing the creatures and the sets were doing real work. The rest of the film just doesn't rise to that level. Now let's talk about the bad. Gamera vs. Viras leans way too hard on stock footage. It's not even subtle about it. The Virians literally sit down and watch clips from the previous movies to learn about Gamera's history. That is the setup. They play entire scenes from earlier films, framed as exposition, and expect you to go along with it. It is lazy, plain, and simple. It doesn't feel like a nod or a recap. It's just filler for a movie that's already 72 minutes. It's barely a movie. I'm sure if you cut out all the stock footage, it's not even a full-length feature film. And I get it. I've gotten comments before where people say, well, stock footage back then wasn't too bad because, there wasn't really home media releases yet. And so people saw these movies in theaters and then didn't see them for a while. And so the stock footage was kind of new. But to me, I just think it's still lazy. It still shows how cheap the film is. It's a pain to sit through. It really is. And even in the theatrical cut, which does trim things down a lot, the reliance is just so obvious. Most of the movie, 95% of it, is watching these kids explore the alien ship, and it just causes the pacing to drag for a movie that is, again, 72 minutes long. You get sudden beats of action, and then you kind of wake up and go, oh my god, this is going to be great. And then you realize it's not new footage. It's Gamera destroying Tokyo in black and white. Yes, this movie is in color, and they just cut to black and white scenes and expect you to not care or notice. It completely breaks the flow of the movie. If they'd bothered to present it as a flashback or a stylized archive video feed in the Virian spaceship, it might have worked. But they don't. They just dump entire destruction scenes into the runtime to pad things out. It reeks of desperation. This series already feels like it's eating itself to stay afloat, and we're only 4 movies in. There are still 4 more entries left in the Showa era, and we know where this trend leads, with Gamera Super Monster being almost wall-to-wall stock footage, and you can trace the rot right back to this movie, Gamera vs. Viras. It unfortunately sets the precedent that recycling old material is an acceptable solution. On top of that, the child protagonists are just unbearable to watch. The movie hands them the spotlight and never takes it back. They talk constantly, and none of it matters. Their dialogue isn't charming or clever or even functional. It's noise. I don't mind child leads in kaiju films when they're used well. Godzilla's Revenge worked for what it was. Godzilla vs. Hedorah gave the kid a clear perspective in a world that's falling apart. But the kids in Gamera vs. Viras are just stuck on a loop. They wander the spaceship, repeat the same exposition, and drag the pacing down with them. This could have been a really fun and tense setup of kids are trapped on an alien spaceship. Like, you could do a Goonies type thing with it, and it would have a ton of potential. But nothing interesting ever happens. There's no mystery to solve. We know the aliens are bad guys. There's never any escalating danger. It's just two flat characters walking through hallways, narrating the obvious while the film kills time. There's never any urgency or momentum. It's just delay. And again, the pacing is a disaster. 72 minutes should fly by. Instead, it feels like a slog. I caught myself checking the runtime halfway through, hoping it was almost over. Every scene just blends together. Stock footage does break up the monotony, but even that gets old fast. You start hoping that something new will happen, only to get more aimless wandering. There is one moment in this movie that comes close to having emotional weight, and it's when the boys tell the military to destroy the spaceship, even if it means killing them in the process.
Sister, please tell this to the others. Blast the spaceship. Don't think about us.
It's unexpectedly dark for like no reason. It comes out of nowhere.
Go on. We want you to do it.
Jim!
Oh, no, Jim.
Oh, Jim! Oh, Jim!
Like the parents are there and they're crying and like everyone's like, oh my god.
Mama, Papa, please understand. All that matters is rescuing the Earth.
The military's gonna have to kill these kids. But then the movie backs out almost immediately and NATO calls and they're like, we're not fucking doing that shit. We're not gonna bomb kids.
We can't sacrifice the boys to them. We've been ordered to surrender.
From there, then, the movie slides right back into cartoon logic. The boys try to free Gamera from mind control, the aliens get louder, the ship gets brighter, and nothing surprises you, nothing builds. The film just drifts towards the finish line, hoping you don't notice how little is actually happening. Getting back to what works now, we're gonna stop being toxic for a little bit. Gamera vs. Viras has some of the strongest underwater sequences in the entire Showa era. No question. These scenes look better than anything Toho ever pulled off underwater, including in films like Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, which should have delivered in that area, but it just didn't. The movie had Godzilla fighting a giant lobster and still managed to make the ocean feel weightless and empty. Viras, on the other hand, actually uses the water. You can feel the drag, the force, and the impact of the movement. The miniature work also sells the scale really well. It's one of the few moments where the film feels tactile. The downside is that you have to wait for it. Gamera and Viras don't even trade blows until the final stretch of the movie. It takes way too long to get there, but once it hits, it delivers. The fight is absurd in all the right ways. There's a moment where Gamera is swimming full speed, ramming Viras across the ocean floor, and the theme music starts swelling, and then suddenly Viras gets stuck in the ground and Gamera launches himself over him like a skipping stone. That kind of timing works really well. It's so silly, and the energy is perfect. The whole final fight has the chaotic low-budget charm, and the puppetry and effects might be crude, but the filmmakers are leaning into it. They know what kind of movie this is. It also helps that, for once, Gamera finishes the job himself. For the past 2 movies now, Gamera has needed military intervention or a kid yelling distractions from the sideline in order to help him win the fight. Here, he is victorious on his own terms, and it's one of the few times in the movie where the stakes feel real and the payoff actually lands. Wrapping things up on a more positive note, because I hate being negative for a movie that had a budget this small and had almost nothing going for it, Gamera vs. Viras has real highlights. When the film works, it really works. But the lows are just so brutal. Long stretches of dead air, grating child performances, and shameless stock footage that just kills the pacing. It's not downright unwatchable, but it constantly gets in its own way. I never saw this one growing up, and if I had, maybe I could have had a soft spot for it. I can see a version of myself at age 7 thinking this was the coolest thing ever, but as a 22-year-old man sitting through it now, it's rough. The charm is buried under filler. You get glimpses of something fun, but you have to dig for them. Like, I love the scene of the kids in the submarine meeting Gamera underwater. It feels like something out of The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. It's great stuff. But watching this as an adult, it feels less like a movie and more like a product designed to hit a runtime to sell tickets to kids. There's still value in it, but you really have to want to find it. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick, you're watching Firewood Media. This is part 4 of my massive Gamera retrospective project. Up next, I'll be covering Gamera vs. Giran, but it'll be a bit till I get there. I really want to finish up the Superman retrospective series, and then I also want to cover some other stuff on top of that, so the Gamera videos might take a little bit of a break for a bit. Maybe a few weeks at the very most. Big thank you to our channel members for making videos like these possible. Their names are listed right here on screen. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.